today, I thought we'd do a pamphlet binding. They're really nice, simple bindings, and they tell you a lot about, the beginnings of bookbinding, certainly for us. So have you managed to get together what I suggested?
Paper, clip,
Excellent.
scissors,
Perfect.
pencil.
Yeah.
And I don't have a bone folder, but I do have a fish knife.
Oh, that'll do fine. It's only something to fold the paper with.
And some thread and needles.
Yeah, fortunately, this is a bone folder, made of bone, used for folding. So we're going to be...
the vegan alternative.
Perfect, yeah. I shall take the screen away from me and go down to the paper. So I'll talk you through, the tools and materials as we go as well. So I've got 4 bits of computer printer paper. You can use cartridge paper, whatever.
So I need mine so you can see what I'm doing with my hands.
Yeah, that's a good idea. Yeah, thanks.
Oh, well, it's not really working.
Yeah. Oh well, it's nice to see you. Doesn't really matter what size paper you use for this. What's important is the grain of paper, and I'll talk you quickly through the grain. All machine-made papers have a particular grain. Handmade papers have a grain as well, but it's less of a problem with handmade papers because of the way that they're made. With machine-made papers, because it's an industrialized process, everything's all the pulp that makes up paper, usually it's made of wood pulp. Sometimes it's cloth pulp, something like that, but it's an organic pulp. With a handmade paper, the pulp you stir by hand, and then you pour into a frame, and you can sort of move that pulp around, you drain the water out and stuff, but because you're moving it in various directions, the little fibres in the pulp tend to mesh nicely and all over the place. So it doesn't give a specific grain direction. So handmade papers are much easier to use with bookbinding. But if you're using a machine made, because of the industrialized process, all those little fibres end up being shaken and shaken in one direction. And then they go along a big conveyor belt, and they all start to form into one direction. And it's the way that they go gives you the strength of the grain. That's the grain direction. And with bookbinding, the grain direction does make a big difference in how the paper performs when you fold it, and particularly when you put glue onto it when it gets damp, because it cockles. So you want the cockling or the warping going in your direction. And for bookbinding, the grain direction always needs to run from head to tail. And head to tail is the top to the bottom of the book. So the grain direction runs in the same direction as the spine. And that gives it strength. It just makes the whole process easier. So to work out your grain direction, get one of your bits of paper in your hand and gently fold it from, not fold, but bend from side to side. I'm going to do long side to long side first. And I'm going to try and...
Yeah, this one feels better.
That resistance, yeah? Well, I'm pushing it that way, and I'm going to try it again from short side to short side and see if I can feel the difference. Yeah, I've got more resistance, short side to short side. Long side to long side on mine, it feels like it wants to bend that way. And I happen to know that the grain direction in this is this way. And because it's running in the same direction as the long side, it's called long grain. If it was running in the direction of the short side, it would be called short grain. So what about your bit?
I think mine is short grain. This feels a lot easier. There's more resistance this way.
Ah, interesting. Okay. Well, your book's going to be a slightly different shape to mine because you do need to work with the grain in that case. Okay. So, having said all of that, we're going to fold against the grain though to begin with.
Okay.
So you're going to be working in a landscape format?
Yeah.
Okay, so the first way you want to fold your paper is long side to long side. I'm going to fold mine short side to short side, which is actually against the grain, but our books are going to be with the grain, because in a minute we're going to fold that paper again. When you make one fold in a piece of paper, like we've just done, in whatever direction, it's a folio fold. And a folio fold gives you 2 pages, 4 sides. But our little bits of paper, we're going to fold again. So you're now going to fold yours in the same direction as your grain. So you're going to end up with a little landscape format book.
Oh, nice.
I'm going to end up with a little portrait format book. So with that second fold that we've put in, I've now got 4 pages and 8 potential sides to use. And that's called a quarto fold. And these are going to form the pages, the book block of our book, the pages that we're going to write on eventually. So fold one of those, but I want more pages. So I'm going to use one of my other bits and fold that again in the same way. So you fold, first of all, against the grain. Oh, and having gone on about a bone folder, you want to be using your fish knife as well. Anyway, fold, take your bone folder, your fish knife, your ruler, anything, along the fold that you've made. Push it along and it pushes the air out and it makes that crease really nice and crisp. And again on that second fold, use your bone folder, push out the air. And then I'm going to put that quarto fold around the other one that we made. So that's our book block. The book block, as I said, are the pages. I'll run quickly through a bit of anatomy of a book for you.
I'm just folding my third bit of paper. Yeah, that would be good to hear.
Yeah. So the little book form that we're making, it's going to be a pamphlet fold. It's got one section, a single section pamphlet fold book. This kind of square rectangular book format is called a codex book. It's not the only kind of book form. There are lots of different book forms. We have accordion books that are folded on a zigzag. You've got lots of different kind of Eastern bindings. There are Chinese style and Japanese style bindings that are stitched down along the inside of the spine. Oh, I'm stumbling over my words today, I'm afraid. It's not been a great day, but hey ho, there we are in our new times. On the inside of books, you often find a decorative page or a couple of pages. These are called end papers. We're going to make some end papers as well in a minute. So the pages on the inside of this one, these are little square paper. It's quite nice. This bit in here is called the book block. The pages here are called the end papers. And then on the outside, we've got a cover. The top of the book is called the head. And the bottom is called the tail or the foot. The bit along where we're going to sew, that's called the spine. And the bit along the front, the bit where you turn the pages, and on a codex book, you can turn the pages one by one. This is called the foredge. So it's a rough bit, but we'll write those down on the little pamphlet book that we're going to make anyway, because it's a good way of learning and remembering. Okay, so we've got our book block, 2 sets of folded pages, or as many as you like, really. You can't put too many into a single section, but you can certainly go up to, like about 10. But for our...
Can I put all 4 pages in then?
Well, no, I wouldn't, because the other 2 pages that I asked you to get, we're going to make into our end papers, and one of those is our cover. So really, this is an introductory book form, and it'll give us places to write down the names of things. It will help us remember what we're going to do the rest of our books. So with my third piece, I'm going to make this into my end paper. Often end papers are a different colour or decorative. So to remind myself, I'm going to scribble on both sides of this piece of paper. And I'm going to only do it quickly because this is, as I say, it's an introductory form. So I've done one side, I'm going to turn it over, and I'm going to do the other side again. Now this will remind me that it's different to the book block, and it's going to be different to the cover. But I'm going to fold it in the same way because I want it to be the same size. It's going to fit around my book.
So this is on both sides?
Yeah, on both sides.
Okay.
Cool. So I'm going to fold that again against the grain and then with the grain. And I'm going to fold that around my book block. So it's starting to take the form of a little codex book now. So with my final piece, this is going to become my cover. If I was doing this, you know, as a proper little notebook that I wanted to use for something particular rather than just to remind me of the names of things and of the way of doing things, I'd probably use a slightly thicker card. Like on this one, I've got a thicker pink card, it's just a little bit heavier. I haven't got any end papers on this one. But for our purposes now, this piece of paper is going to do. So I'm going to fold again, a quarto fold. I'm going to use my bone folder that I keep forgetting to use. Yeah, I don't know about you, but I found this week quite long.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, and the change in the weather hasn't helped. Yeah.
No, it's that weird type of year as well where you don't really know what to wear.
Oh, I know, I've got a jumper on, then I'm taking a jumper off, and then I'm putting it back on. But
Yeah.
hey. So with that piece of paper I've just folded as my cover, I'm going to wrap that around the whole thing. So it's starting now to look like a book. In a minute we're going to sew it, but before I do that, I'm going to write on the front here, I'm going to write cover, and I'm going to write front, and then cover underneath. When we start working with harder covers, I'm going to start calling this bit the board. So where I've got front written, I'm going to write board next to that. And on the back of the book, I'm going to write backboard. So as I say, this little book will become quite a good reference point for when we make different forms, because I'll start to be using a lot of the bookbinding terminology that we'll use further on in the classes. Do you remember what I said that the name of the top of the book was?
The head.
Yeah, so I'm going to write that down on there as well, again to remind me. And then the bottom of the book?
Base.
Tail or foot.
Tail.
Yeah, books are very like us.
Tail.
Yeah, head, tail. Yeah, or foot. That's another name for the bottom of a book. And again, like us. Do you remember what I called this bit along where we're
Is that
going
the spine?
to? That's the spine, absolutely. And like us, the spine provides us with good support to stand us up. And the bit along the front, the open bit,
Yeah.
that's called the foredge. So F-O-R-E and then edge. And I like to think of it as a little bit like a face. I quite like it. It's like the face of a book. And then the book inside, as you can see, I've got my decorated bits there. I'm going to write down their end paper. And that again will remind me of what that's called. And while we're at it, I'll open it up into the book block bit, and I'm going to write book block here. If it had writing or text on it, it would be called a text block. Cool. However, as this is a bookbinding course, we need to bind now this book. And there are various ways you can do this. You could just put an elastic band straight around it now. And if you're not confident with sewing, that's quite a good way of doing it. It won't last for forever, but it's effective. But we're going to sew it. So knock it square. That means knocking all the pages into the right kind of, so that they're all the same size. And then if you've got your bulldog clip or just a regular peg, anything like that, I'm going to peg down one side of the forage. I've got my peg on the backboard and then the
like this.
Yeah, so I've opened it up to the middle. Perfect, yeah. And we're going to do a pamphlet stitch. This is a little pamphlet book, so the pamphlet stitch fits this book form. And we're going to need to make 3 holes. I'm going to make a mark in the middle along the spine, along the gutter, and I'm going to make a mark a little bit further up. I've left maybe 2 centimetres or maybe 3 centimetres from the head and the tail, and I've made those marks sort of equidistant. I'm not very good with rulers, so I've done mine by eye. So I've made a mark in the middle, a mark above, and a mark below. And that's where I'm going to want to make my holes. I've got a bradawl. This is a traditional tool for making holes. You could use a corkscrew. You could use a needle if it's strong enough to get through. There's only a few pages here, so a needle should do. You could use a compass point. Anything really that's got a spike on it. A bradawl's nice because it fits into the palm of your hand well. So where I've made that mark, I'm going to put the point of my bradawl. I'm actually going to put the book block down on the table and push through because I want the hole coming out on the fold of the spine. So I've made one hole and then I'm going to make one above and I'm going to make one below. So I'll do that with 3 holes. How are you doing with that?
I ended up having to use a leather working needle.
That'll be all right if it gets through.
Yeah, it works pretty well actually.
That kind of needle, we'll use one like that when we come to do a Coptic binding. Yeah.
Let's go through a bit. Missed the spine on mine a little bit.
Oh, don't worry. It's your first one. It's fine.
Okay.
I'm afraid I'm not doing terribly well today either. I keep stumbling over my words. But...
Oh, I was going to tell you, I found elastic.
Oh, cool. What, the cord elastic?
Yeah, they had raised stitch. I know it's a bit of a trick. Raised stitch on Essex Road. They've got loads of different types.
Oh, have they? Have they got different colours?
Mainly, I think so. Yeah, mainly black and white, but I think they've got colours as well.
Cool, that's good to know about. Because in Holloway, you can't find it for love nor money. The sort of 2 mil cord elastic. It's it's been a rush on.
It was funny because I went in the shop and I was like, this might be a stupid question, but do you have any? And it was all like just under my nose.
Oh, brilliant. Oh, well, thanks for that, Jess. Yeah, I might take a trek out there.
Nice
Okay, so for threads, with this little book form, the amount of thread you're going to need, I suggest as it's your first, I'd go for 3 times the height of your book. So I'm going to measure 1, 2, 3. And then
double up my thread, so I'm going to measure 6.
Yep, cool. I mean, traditionally in bookbinding, you'd be using an unbleached linen thread, but we don't need that for this. Because really, you can use any thread you like. It's if you know the methods, that's really what you need to know. And I think the most important thing about bookbinding, kind of working with any kind of paper, is understanding that paper grain, because it does make a huge difference to your work. All right, this is probably going to take me an hour to thread my needle. Oh wow, look, I've done that.
Could you do this on I know it wouldn't be the same.
Huh?
I was just going to ask if you could do this on a sewing machine, but it wouldn't be the same, would it?
Well, you can do it on a sewing machine. you'd be unlikely to get the, you know, such long stitches. But you could put that under the sewing machine and just run a seam up along there. Yeah, you can get that paper through. Yeah. I mean, all we're really doing is connecting these pages together securely. How you do that is up to you. I mean, convention and tradition suggests this way for a pamphlet book. They're nice, actually. These I love these little pamphlet books. You make zines, don't you?
I do make zines, yes.
This kind of little book format's perfect binding for a zine.
I was just thinking that actually that would be a really nice little touch. I might try that in the future.
Yeah, it would lend itself well. And then, you know, once you start playing around with the covers as well, it's really nice. And you don't really need end papers. Again, as I say, they're just conventional. And we will be using those when we go on to do multi-section books and things. Yeah, cool. Oh, I'm wittering again. Right, so with a pamphlet book, you can either start on the middle, on the inside or on the outside with your sewing. If you start on the outside, it means the knot will be on the outside, but you might want to turn that into a bow and, you know, make a feature of it in the binding. Or you can start on the inside. I'm going to start on the inside because I'd rather my knot was on the inside. So I've got my needle threaded. I don't tie any knots. Certainly not on this one. So I've got, no knot, needle threaded, and the first place my needle goes is in the middle hole. So I'm starting on the inside of the book and I'm putting my needle through the middle hole. I'm going to turn my book around, pull the thread through, but don't pull it all the way through. You want to leave yourself a tail of just a couple of centimetres or so. If you can, hold on to it with a finger, but if that's a problem, put it underneath your peg and your peg will keep it securely in place. Okay, how are you doing?
Yep, I've got my first one done.
Fab. Right, so the next place the needle goes is up to the next hole. Put the needle in, pull it through. So we're on the inside of the book now. And then you go right the way down to the middle, to the bottom hole, and pull it through.
There we are. Sorry, that was a little bit more fiddly.
Do you know, I used to teach this at in the British Library to kids. I don't know how many thousands of kids I taught to make little pamphlet books, and I do hope they're filling them full of, you know, sort of outrageous ideas and flogging them off the back of a cart somewhere, like a traditional pamphlet should be. Right, so the last place my needle goes is back through that middle hole.
Ooh.
And then we're back on the inside. We're going to tie a knot in a minute, so we need to make sure that the threads are in the right place. You need one thread either side of that long stitch that we made. So I'm going to pull up that long stitch, the one that we made from top to bottom. I'll pull that up a little bit, and I'm going to slip my needle underneath. Yeah, can you see what I mean? So you need a thread on one side, thread on the other, tighten up that stitch, and then just tie two little half hitch knots. So one, and then followed by another one. So that's the sewing done.
Fab.
I'm going to cut that back. Don't cut too closely to the knot because you don't want the stitching coming apart. And again, to remind myself, I'm going to write in the middle here next to the sewing, 3-hole pamphlet stitch. You can do a pamphlet stitch with more holes. I think it all has to be an odd number so that you end up in the same place every time. And depending on, like the if you're working with like really big bits of paper, you might want to have additional stitches in there. Just gives it a bit more security. But the 3-hole is a really nice one. So that's our sewing done.
Ooh.
Starting to really look like a book. You might notice at the foredge here that the pages are stepping out a bit.
Mm.
Yeah? The more pages that you put in, the more it will step out. Yeah, by the nature of the beast, it's pushing them out. If you wanted to, you could trim that up. And if you were going to do that, I'd do it with a knife. And you keep the book closed. And you'd get yourself a steel ruler and a craft knife. And you can cut the whole thing. When you come to making other ones, if you wanted the cover slightly larger, you sort of prepare all the inside first. And then you'd wrap your cover around, because you might want to leave a little bit of it. It's called a square, where the cover is slightly larger. Traditionally, these kind of little books are cut flush, so the cover is the same size as the text block or the book block. But for our sort of introductory purposes, we're not going to worry about that. However, you may have noticed we can't turn all those pages yet because of the folds that are in there. So the next thing that we're going to do is open those folds. I'm not going to use scissors because I think it's a bit savage on paper. It's much nicer to tear. And your fish knife will be perfect for tearing this, because it's rather like a letter opener. You could use a ruler, you could use anything that will slip through. I'm going to use my bone folder, and I'm going to open my book out right to the middle, and on each of the pages I'm going to cut. I'm also going to cut my end papers, but I'm not going to cut my cover. I'm going to keep my cover with the fold to remind myself that it should be a little bit thicker than the inside bits, just to remind me of the difference. So where I've got that fold at the head of the page, I put my bone folder in, and I'm going to tear along it. I like the noise as well, and it gives you a nice kind of
It's very satisfying.
settle. Yeah, it is. If you look in like second-hand bookshops, you can often come across old books that haven't had all of their pages opened, which I always find quite nice.
I remember Sylvie said ages ago that it was more common with French books to still do that.
It depends. It depends on how they're made. Yeah, usually they'll, because sort of book production now is sort of predominantly industrialized. That will all be taken care of by a machine. But sort of originally, you'd have got a binder, to make your book, and often the convention was to leave the pages untorn, unopened, so that you'd know you were the first person to, own the book, I guess. And it's nice to see books of some old novels and old books of poetry and stuff. Some of the pages haven't been opened up, and you think, oh, now is that because the book got really boring and you just couldn't be bothered to read the rest of it? I think it's quite sad sometimes, but it's quite nice when you come across those. Right, yeah. So I've opened all my pages. As I say, I've left my cover. And there you have a little pamphlet book. Yeah. As I say, if you wanted to start to, look further at just that book form, because you can go quite a long way with little pamphlet books. Like with this one, I've put a pink card cover on, and I've stuck an additional spine piece on the outside there. And I've made that with, I don't know if you can recognise it. Can you recognise what that packaging might have been from? It's from a Pucker tea box.
Oh wow! Oh, it looks really nice.
It is, isn't it? It is quite nice. As I say, you check the grain, and then it opens up all sorts of possibilities for what you can use. Like this one, for example, it's got a nice card cover on it. And I don't know if you can recognise the popular breakfast cereal that has.
Is that Weetabix? No.
Oh, it's a Shreddies one. That one.
Shreddies.
Yeah. So if you can't get fancy card. And I remember at the beginning of lockdown, getting hold of things was really, really difficult. and it's a great way of, you know, recycling packaging. But if you wanted to take it a step further, you could get a bit fancier. You can make you know, larger formats. Once you've got the grain cracked, you know, you can you make these books any size you like, and they're actually really nice little forms. And I've noticed that a lot of people that make journals, they go and buy packs of these little books to put inside their journals that they're doing. In fact, I've just made some journals. I'll show you one quickly. I made this little one.
Oh, lovely.
Yeah, well, this has got a suede cover. Actually, this is the vegan leather,
Nice.
which is
That's lovely.
yeah, it is actually. It works quite well. But I'll show you what I mean about the little pamphlet books being useful for something like this. So inside, you make the little sections that go in there. I don't know, you fill them full of your poetry or whatever, pictures, drawings, and the way they're bound is with, I mean, I'll show you this another day, but you use elastic sort of insert bits, and then you can slot your little pamphlet books inside. So you can keep the really nice cover that you make, but when you fill up the little sections, you can just replace them with more. So it is quite a nice form. Like I say, we'll do one of these as well. And knowing how to make these means that you will know how to make these. So it's quite nice. It's a nice introductory form. So, how was that?
That was great, thank you.
Yeah, pleasure.
Easy to follow, very thorough. I liked the bit of kind of information about the different parts of the book and stuff like that, and some of the kind of background about how paper's made and how things are done. So yeah, that was really good. I think it's nice to have that kind of extra bit of context. I enjoyed that.
Good, thank you. Like I say, I'm not all on it today, but you know, we have our good days and bad days, I guess. But before we finish, I'm going to ask you a question that I used to ask the kids when I used to work with them, and it's a nice one to think about too. It's like, what is a book? It's a funny one, isn't it? Because they're such familiar objects, and we're so used to them that, you know, I think sometimes we forget that, you know, they've got incredible functions. And trying to boil down what it is that a book is quite a tricky one. I mean, I've thought about it over the years, and I mean, I know books are fantastic as objects, not simply to look at. My sofa's held up with books because it's got a broken leg, so I've got a book underneath it. But I can remember one kid, you know, sort of posed the question, what is a book? And for me, it's a container, you know. And this kid said it's a platform. It's a platform for ideas, which
nice.
Really, really, really lovely. Yeah, yeah. Yeah. So on that note, I'll leave you.